tell us, since you've left JD.com on January the 1st this year, what you have been up to apart from being stuck in quarantine as well? What has happened in your professional life since?
Okay, first of all, thank you for having me. It's my honor to join this program. So first of all, I myself left JD.com. I used to be the president for JD Cloud for 2.5 years, I think. And then in the past 2.5 years, my team and I, we were pretty proud for what we have achieved. So basically, we increased the business for 20x within the 2+ years. And then I started to think about what's going to be my next chapter. So I decided to pursue my own career. So far, me and some of my partners, we set up a new tech investment company called Apurimac Partners. And we're aiming to help some of the tech companies to get bigger, not just go IPO, but to be more integrated to a certain degree. And so this is our new focus areas.
And where in the tech industry in specific? And is it only Chinese companies, or are you planning to merge Western and Chinese tech companies, tech plays as well?
Other than the Beijing office, we also set up different offices in Hong Kong. And so, but we're going to start to look at the Chinese company first. Having said that, in the new norm, we're seeing a lot of Western company coming to China. And then and in China is going to be more open to a certain degree and welcome the hybrid companies, I think, in the future. So we start with China first, but we definitely aim globally.
You have been one of the most brilliant tech minds that I have come across in Beijing. And I don't say this because you are in front of me, but really through past projects that we have been working on together, Samuel. And you just mentioned that you wanted to build more consolidation into China's tech space. But from a US-China comparative perspective, the U.S., the Silicon Valley tech companies have become part of the campaign slogan in this U.S. presidential election. Particularly, that's what Elizabeth Warren campaigned on, that Silicon Valley tech companies are too big and we need to break them up. And yet, when we look at China, Alibaba, Tencent, and ByteDance, they are all too big. They are huge. And they have each built their own ecosystems. And so now yet here you are promoting for further consolidation. How big should tech companies be? What will be an optimal size for tech companies, you think?
In my opinions, in the tech industry, bigger is not a bad thing. The only thing is you have to make sure the marketplace is a fair playing field. If you are bigger, it becomes more monopoly. For example, if you're a big company, number one company in tech industry, and you are acquiring the number two tech industry, basically get rid of all the competition, and then you become monopoly. That wouldn't be good. Speaking of China, Tencent is one big company, and Alibaba is another one. But other than Tencent and Alibaba, we have Baidu, we have ByteDance, we have JD, we have several big name companies in their specific industries. We want to make sure there is a competition within, because the competition is it's benefiting consumers, enterprise, and so on and so forth. So I think the big by itself is not a bad thing, but we want to have a positive competition in between. Mm-hmm.
Talking about competition, of course, with COVID-19 and working from home, we've seen a sharp increase in the use of Zoom, for example, other online conferencing systems. And you know about all of this very well because you've had a long experience at Microsoft, more than 20 years. So you saw these developments happening. Also, Tencent has come up with a new online streaming platform, VooV, I think it's called. So what kind of competition do you see in this area, and what's next in this space?
Yeah, very interesting, because the year of the rat definitely is not is not very peaceful. And especially, I think post-COVID-19, digital transformation is no longer a competitive advantage. It's going to become a competitive requirement for all the businesses. And as cities across the globe go into a lockdown mode because of COVID-19 pandemic, Zoom, you mentioned about, has emerged, become a new video calling star. The products and services are pervasively used. And the services has proven become useful to connect people, schools, or even friends. But as you said, Zoom is now facing more competition. My ex-company, Microsoft, has a team for enterprise to communicate from a video calling. But also a Chinese company, the tech giant Tencent, is also jumping into the ring with its own video conferencing services called VooV. As a matter of fact, Tencent actually released 2 products. One for Tencent Meeting, that is used domestically. Another is called VooV, to be used internationally. The 2 products basically have similar features, but because their nature, they do have some unique focusing areas. For example, Zoom has something called the virtual backgrounds. So when we're doing the video calling, we can change our backgrounds. And while Tencent, coming from the consumer side, they have something called the beauty filter, right? So you can basically do a virtual makeup, right, before the video calling, things like that.
It's like made to basically for online conferencing.
Yeah, more suitable for video conferencing. Yeah.
And then after the lockdown is lifted and your boss sees you face to face, he will sack you right away because you don't look as beautiful.
Yes, totally. So in my opinion, this is a good market-driven competition. I wouldn't consider that to be a political-driven competition. That's my opinion. And I wouldn't be surprised because the Tencent pick up the VooV to enter the video calling segment because, first of all, it is a very strategically important. Why? Because of high frequency usage. And then it also has a viral effect. Let's say 4 of us, 3 of us, we're communicating right now. If 2 of us are using Zoom, I think the last one is going to use Zoom, whether you like it or not. So this one has the viral effect. So I wouldn't be surprised longer term, both platforms have their ecosystem, have more products to be integrated, more features to be integrated.
So Samuel, you're talking about video conferencing perhaps becoming a state of life, not only for work, but also for socializing. And here we're talking about 3 major competitors, that's Zoom, and you mentioned Microsoft, and Tencent's VooV. And so basically we're talking about 3 big players carving out this whole global video conferencing space. So how competitive is that? To me, that's quite monopolistic, isn't it?
If you think about the 3 players in this particular space, Zoom, the founder, Eric originally coming from Cisco. So he has a strong background for the WebEx. I think most of people know WebEx is a very, I would say, very expensive enterprise video conferencing systems to make you doing a video conference and just like very vivid. Just like very live and very vivid. And Microsoft coming from the enterprise office space and things like that. So Microsoft Teams integrated very well with the entire office application, productivity services, and so on and so forth. Tencent from the other angle, because it has a strong WeChat applications or services. And the WeChat, so far, I think most of the Chinese people, regardless whether you live in China or outside of China, or even for foreigners, as long as you want to do the business with Chinese companies, I think you probably have the WeChat accounts. So that WeChat account specifically, and also the mini programs within the WeChat platforms, becomes a great leverage for Tencent to go after this specific market. So I think the end results, hopefully, customers would be the best winner. at the end, because with the great market driven competition, I think at the end, customers is the segment who benefit a lot.
Did say that for the Zoom and VooV competition, it's a market-based competition. It's nothing political. We understand that. But at the same time, throughout U.S. universities, including university like Harvard, they have been sending out emails confirming that we believe it is a safe option for students to participate in Zoom online classrooms, just to make sure that there is no security concerns out there. And so there is a level of subtle concern about Zoom's security situation, because 76 of their R&D staff are actually based in China, and yet all of a sudden you have this Tencent VooV as a video conferencing app that's completely owned by a Chinese company. And so today, on one hand, we're saying, well, this whole global competition is, run by two of the three major players, as you mentioned, that are closely connected to China. And yet at the same time, you cannot really run a successful video conference app without having 22% of the world's population in there supporting it.
Okay, in my opinion, I would separate the statement that you just made into two parts. One part is, I think everyone agrees, the tech world is not going to be the same after the U.S.-China trade dispute happened last year. And we're going to expect to see more competition for technology in between down the road. There's no question at all. But whether or not there will be two separate tech stacks competing with each other, I don't know. But I think from a customer point of view, we definitely want to see more interoperable. We want to have a great competition by market driven, not by political driven. I think that's very, very important. Because in the end, market driven competition will provide us higher quality, more differentiation, lower price, increased efficiency, and better services. And Shirley mentioned about the China, because by population, China has probably accounted for 22% of total Earth's population, right? So from that regards, I think all the services, all the tech products and things like that, you cannot exclude China. You have to consider about the China, US, and the rest of the world as a whole. After all, we only have one planet. We don't have two different planets. So we have to make sure it's a good competition, but they're competing for a better world, not to compete for interoperability, not to compete for incompatibility. Yes.
To which extent can you ignore politics? I mean, you still have to listen to the news and follow, or do you just, keep going and focus on your tech industry?
In my opinion, each of the government definitely have their own priorities, and a government, I think at the end of the day, care about privacy, security, and things like that. And so I'm not saying it's easy, but I think a tech company, for their own stakeholders, for their employees, for their customers, they really need to be smart enough to create the right products, right services, abide by the rule, regulation, but interoperable. I think the key word is interoperable. There's no way you can be totally isolated. And the COVID-19 is a good example, right? You think that specific coronavirus can be contained? It is not contained. It spreads like fast. It's far more than you can expect it. And so I think we should learn from the coronavirus, the COVID-19, that the world is connected. Whether or not you can't separate it. There's no way you can totally be immune from the virus attack. Likewise, you can be separate. You can be isolated without the tech talk to tech. without the tech, interoperable with the tech.
Talking about new norms, Samuel, I think tech decoupling is the new norms for us going forward, because on my computer, I have Tencent Meeting, I have VooV, I have Zoom, I have WhatsApp, I have WeChat. I mean, how many more apps do I need on my computer? Is there a point where we potentially could see all these social media apps converging at some point?
Probably going to be hard to get convergence. It's just like how many bank accounts that either one of us have, right? We probably have 3 more or 4 more bank accounts, things like that. How many credit cards that we have, right? We have multiple credit cards because each credit card probably have its own purposes, right? And likewise for communication tools. I think the good thing is you probably have 3. Because why you cannot have more than 3? Because think about the business. They are providing, let's say, video calling services, not for free, not for charity, they're for commercial purposes. And in order to support high quality, high efficiency, affordable prices, there's a huge cost behind that. And then, therefore, company want to get into the new space will probably have to think twice. If you don't have enough economy scale, it's not going to be profitable. No company on the planet would like to continue losing money without seeing the light in the tunnel. So I think there's going to be a handful competition, which is at the end of the day is good for the consumers, but it's going to be super hard for them to get convergence, in my opinion.
If you were a foreign investor or Chinese investor, where exactly would you put your cash now in China's tech world at the moment?
Oh yeah, definitely. And as a matter of fact, Martina, since you mentioned that, because nowadays, I think especially from February, there's a new buzzword in China called the new infrastructure. Not sure whether you have followed the new infrastructure, but China basically kicked off the new infrastructure investment stimulation strategy. I think in February or March timeframe, for the purpose to combat, early March, right? To combat the looming economic downturn. If you have not heard of the new infrastructure before, you're probably going to hear it a lot more in 2020. Basically, not just bring the comfort to the Chinese energy market, because it has been increasingly struggling because of the China slowdown of growth, trade tensions, and as well the economic disruptions due to coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak. But the concept of new infrastructure is not novel. It was actually debuted in 2018, as the State Council mentioned that as one of the industry development priorities. But now the new infrastructure becomes the national priority, and also the scope has expanded to cover 7 different areas. The first one is 5G, and then artificial intelligence, the AI, industry IoT, and also the internet data centers, the IDC, especially for those kind of hyperscale data centers, and also the ultra high voltage transmission grids, and also electrical vehicle charging networks.
I mean, in all these areas, China is a leader, right? If you look at 5G, EVs, it's the biggest market in the world. I mean, it's just taking off. There is not much, competition probably coming from the US or from Europe in the next couple of years. So do you think they can still catch up?
I think most of the China pick up. I think the government pick up the 7 areas, not because they are in a leaders quadrant, but because it is important, critically important with China's next 50 years. And then, so the government decided to basically support the entire industry to make it right, because you're not going to have a chance. You're not going to have a second chance to right it wrongs. So you have to get it right up front. So that's very important. And then China has probably some of the areas probably has the largest market. EV, for example, China probably have the largest EV markets. But you also have to consider about how do you drive the migration, because you can't just throw out the EV policy one day, to make things right, which is not possible. Think about China has tier 1 city, tier 2 cities, and tier 3, tier 4, tier 5, tier 6. So not just about the urban area, but also rural areas. So there's lots of things to be considered. 5G is another good example. It's 2020 could be the year of 5G. Right? It's probably going to take a few years to get the 5G pervasively applied or used. So it's going to be multi-years efforts. IDC is not a good example. So these are, in my opinion, great focus areas for foreign investment to come into China.
I just read from the Beijing municipal document that actually 70% of the new infrastructure funding will actually come from non-government sectors. And so how is the private equity market in China today to support this sort of funding? Is there still sufficient liquidity in the market, you think?
No, I would say the past 6 months, we saw a slowdown from the capital market point of view, because what happened was mainly triggered by the U.S.-China trade tension, and then so that specific ones basically triggered most of the investors to think twice. So you want to invest smartly. So that's number one. Number two, we also see the so-called Internet Plus. The Internet Plus, to a certain degree, is more like an information superhighway or Industry 4.0 sort of initiatives, right? And then we started to see that specific Internet Plus trend moving from a pure consumer to be more enterprise, and also so that contributed some. So in the past, most of the investors put money into the internet company primarily for the consumer related. But now we started to see more industry focus, so I think several factors contribute to the capital market to become basically think twice, holding the cash.
I saw the announcement from China Mobile and China Unicom on 500,000 of the 550,000 the 5G base stations that are going to be constructed this year and forward. And so the successful bidders are Huawei, ZTE, Datang, and a little bit of Ericsson mixed up in there. To me, these companies are super huge. And so you support industry consolidations, but is there still any space within the 5G market for smaller companies? And is there any possibilities for tech startups in this area at all?
Yeah, our company probably focus more on the data center space and also edge computing space rather than the 5G space, because 5G space may not be our sweet spots to focus on, and that's number one. And number two, 5G is going to take time to get mature because a lot of people question about the 5G. Is that a 4G plus 1 or 6G minus 1? It's a super hard question to answer, because if you think about it as a 4G plus 1, you simply think about it as a faster. That's it, right? Yeah. 3G basically helps you to stream music. You think of 4G helps you to stream video. And 5G is supposed to stream gaming and also office services. But what else? But then if, on the flip side, you think 5G from the 6G minus 1 point of view, then a lot of technology underneath need to be changed.
So for a consumer like Shirley and I and you, of course, as well, which G is the best one? Should we aim for 5G or should we just be happy with 4G plus 1?
4G plus 1 point of view, that's more evolutionary. 6G minus 1, that's more revolutionary. And then so today, put it this way, are we not happy about the 4G speed? I think the answer is no. We're pretty happy, right? Because I'm okay for the 4G speed. You know, I can streaming my video. I don't have to download the video. Not like a 3G world. I don't have to download the video, right? And then I'm okay to do a video conferencing on the 4G speed. And then so why do I need a 5G, right? Think about that for the moment. And so that's why when we talk about the technology viewpoints, if you purely think about the 5G is only 4G plus 1, then we're not really driving, then we're not pushing hard enough. We're simply making, you know, we're costing a lot of money, but simply making the speed faster. But speed faster is not something customers are looking for. And so because of that, I think the 5G is way more complicated than the 4G.
One lesson that COVID-19 has taught us is that we have to be happy with what we've got, right? But this is kind of counterintuitive to technology because technology means advancement and development and so on. So probably technology will take over our lives again very soon and aim for 6G even in the future.
Yeah, in my view, the 5G for me is not about getting faster. For me, 5G means, for example, become more decentralized than centralized. And then for me, it's going to drive a lot of new technologies. By itself, it's not a faster technology. It's going to be supporting a lot of new technology coming out. Edge computing, for example, is one thing. Become more decentralized and then more decentralized and driving more driving more creativities, more innovative.
There have been debates about the fundamental nature of 5G technology. A lot of assessment are saying, well, 5G technology, echoing what you said, is actually a evolutionary technology rather than revolutionary. And so it doesn't come to the level of significance to that of the steam engines or the internet. And it may potentially lead to something that is more industrial revolutionary. And so then the question is, how confident are you in seeing 5G technology to truly lead into possibly another wave of global industrial revolution?
I'd like to give you a different viewpoint, like 15,000 feet level high to look at the tech trends for the time being. Think about 1970. In 1970, we're talking about the IBM mainframe. In that decade, we focus on the centralized tech trends. In 1980s, when Microsoft and Intel started to push the Windows and desktop out to, or personal computer to every desktop and every home, things become decentralized because you no longer have to go to log into the mainframe to do a centralized thing. You can rely on your PC to do a lot of decentralized works. So that specific decade focused on decentralization. In 1990s, and people require a browser, which is something we call the thin client. And everything is basically stored in a web server. So it becomes centralized again. And then 2000, when 2000 comes, that specific decades, thanks to the smartphones. Now everybody has a smartphone, probably better than the PC. So you're super connected with your company, with your colleagues, with your friends and families, and so on and so forth. The whole world become decentralized because with the mobile devices, you can basically do everything you like. In 2010, when the whole world talking about the cloud computing, big data, artificial intelligence, all of a sudden become centralized again. So the past 10 years, everything's about the cloud computing, It's about big data. It's about artificial intelligence. Right? It's a centralized game. And then 2020 coming. 2020 is going to be the era for edge computing. 5G is going to stimulating the decentralized versions of that. So think about the huge companies and huge enterprise. They probably have their own cell tower supporting the 5G because you are no longer relying on the carriers to cover all the provide all the signals that you need, right? And also coupling with the virtual realities, coupling with the artificial intelligence for enterprises. So we're going to see in this coming decades, we're going to see a lot of decentralized creativity, innovation, and so on and so forth. And then
so the decade 2020 to 2030 is going to be the age of decentralization.
Yes. And then 2030, that will be the year for quantum computing come out. And quantum computer is going to be 1 million times powerful than the silicon-based personal computer right now. So the whole world is going to be centralized. When you think about the centralized
again.
Yeah, and so when you think about the centralized, decentralized, every 10 years, they turn. Right? It's taking the cycle. And then centralized means efficiency. Decentralized means creativity. So every once in a while, you gain efficiency, but you sacrifice on the creativity. And then when you become decentralized, everybody has a good idea, right? You got a good idea, you go make it happen, and then all of a sudden, you lose the efficiency. But you have a lot of creativity, innovative ideas, and so on and so forth. So if you think about learning from the past and predict the future, every 10 years is a magic number.
So as a tech investor and as a tech pioneer as well, Samuel, your advice is basically to all the teenagers out there in the world to go into quantum computing.
That would be
to save their future.
To save the future. But I think the coming 10 years, think about like 5G. Right. Think about the 5G and also blockchain. What is a blockchain? Blockchain is a decentralized cryptographic technologies, right?
Absolutely.
And so within the 10 years, you're going to see a lot of trigger to help to drive decentralized. That's my opinion.
Recently, Elon Musk has announced the successful launch of commercial satellites via his company SpaceX. And so basically, he wants to get the Earth covered with satellites, and data communications via satellites are a lot quicker and a lot more efficient than using towers. And so that's completely another paradigm, right? As Huawei, we just talked about in the front and center of global debate, and they're trying to build more 5G stations and get into 6G research and development. But then Elon Musk is completely reinventing another paradigm. How do we even see this sort of future telecommunications competition?
Well, commercial satellite, again, it's not something new. From China viewpoints, I think China basically opened the policy in 2015 to encourage commercial satellites research and development. It is a totally right thing to do, because think about if you're going to put a huge tower on the planet, what happened is there's a terrain issue. So all of the signals, you're not going to be able to cover the poor areas, right? But if you have a satellite, especially for commercial satellites, basically lower orbit, I think that provided way better coverage, great coverage. And not only that, not just for commercial purposes, basically, I think we have a great opportunity to redesign the underneath topology, because today we're using the TCP/IP on the internet, and that specific technology has been pretty outdated. But because of compatibility issue, we'll continue to use that. Think about from a blockchain point of view, TCP/IP may not be the right protocol to support it. And then with the commercial satellites, give us a new platforms, new areas to do it to do it the right way. I think we enjoyed the internet for the past 30 years, but for the next 30 years, that requires a new infrastructure. And commercial satellite is one of them.
Exciting. Absolutely. Can't wait for the next decade now.
We avoid this discussion about the China-US tech war. We just talked about the Zoom and VooV, and if US business people want to develop a 100% safe option for them to feel that they could conduct teleconferencing without any potential security concerns at all, then what options do they really have? And so I think it's only feasible to think today that the Chinese developed technologies, the Tencents of the world, are going to continue to expand globally. But at the same time, would that translate into US companies, particularly entering into Chinese market with more success?
Microsoft got into China, I don't know, probably early, I think 1991, maybe. That was the very first year for Microsoft to enter China. Back then, Microsoft continued to grow, not just grow the talents, grow the market, and also help to grow the ecosystem, tech ecosystem. You know, however, still the high-level executive from Microsoft were not happy about the copy infringement issues, the IP infringement issues. There was a copyright issues. Every once in a while gets brought up and so on and so forth. I was using the analogy to describe China to Microsoft executive back then. I was talking about, I said, well, think about China just like the giant teenager back then. Again, I'm not trying to find an excuse for China not paying the license to use the software. But it is a giant, huge market, great populations. However, China back then has a lot of issues to deal with. I think the copyright may not be on top of the list. That was a bitter truth. It is truth, but it's bitter to understand. And then so it's more like you. Sometimes I know you want to sell the product to the customer, but depends on the customer situation. China, to a certain degree, it's not going to be the one size fits all. You can't simply apply whatever country's policy applied to China. It is a country with 22% of the total world population. It has the disparity issue the government has to deal with. If you think about the tier 1 city, tier 6 cities, there's tons of issues. It's a giant teenager. So you have to get it right. You cannot get it wrong because there's no chance to right or wrong at the end of the day. And then so having said that, that requires, I think, in my opinion, the U.S. and China really understand each other. Both countries are great nations in the world, and they're big. Big in terms of economic power, big in terms of the population, big in terms of their influence to the rest of the world. And so it's better to sit down, understand each other, because if both countries can start a dialogue, productive dialogue, I think the whole world can benefit from it, in my opinion.
It's just unfortunate to realize that tech people, they take so differently from politicians, right?
Yeah, you had to find a way to work around the political hurdles, you know,
and try to work together sometime.
Talking about working around the political hurdles, we know that Google actually invested in JD.com back in 2017, and I believe it was $550 million. And very recently, Cloudflare has announced this partnership with JD Cloud, which you have built and run for quite a long time. So are these partnerships strategies successful for foreign companies? Because since 2017, we have not really seen Google succeeding in the Chinese market.
Yeah, I would say a lot of the U.S. companies when they enter China, first of all, it's about a mindset. Microsoft, was a good example. And then Google is another good example. So first of all, for those U.S. tech giants, when they come into China, I still want them. My recommendation is for them to really understand China first, and then because it's fairly common for the U.S. tech giants, they oftentimes they want to have one playbook. That playbook can play well for the whole world, and that is not true. So you can even have a one playbook to play well in China and the U.S. And how could you expect to have a one international playbook to play well for the whole world? Totally understandable, because start from a very small. The often arguments would be that China is only accounting for like 2% of my whole world market. Why China demands a different playbook? It's more like a chicken and egg. You have to understand the fact is that China is different because of size, because of policy, because whatever situation. Unless you don't want to enter the market, if you want to enter the market, you have to understand, abide by the rule, by the regulation, and also invest to get a return. So it's tough. It's tough. I understand to have one playbook is more like a centralized decision, centralized version, high efficiency, right? Shut up, just go do it. But the reality is, China is a different market that requires special attention. It's big enough and have a local competition. So you have to compete very hard in order to gain the market space at the end of the day.
Last question, Neil Shen and the Blackstone's Schwartzman recently had a dialogue, and they called for doubling down on China's investments. What is your take on it? Do you also agree with them to double down on China, to all the investors who are watching this out there?
In my opinion, definitely double down on China. I think in the next 10 years, definitely double down on China. Why? Because China is the next 10 years, even within the China, there's a great opportunity, because the whole country is doing a digital transformation. Unlike the rest of the world, it does not have a lot of legacy. So in certain area, China has the room to leapfrog all the competitors and so on and so forth. That's number one. Number two, China is going to become more and more open for the entire world. Whether or not it's not going to go back. Going back isolated, separated, is no longer. It's not gonna be the right way to do. So China has only way to be more open. And then so from that regards, I think it's a perfect time to doubling down on China. Kind of different segments, all regards consumer enterprises, even for state-owned enterprises and so on and so forth. So I'm all for it.